it's taken a lot to get me onto late night radio. I've been asking for this for years, and all it took was the royal seal of approval.
Oh, wow.
William, it's really great to have you back on Radio 1. I'd love to start with you, please. What would you like to achieve on a show like this? Why have you chosen Radio 1? Why have you brought us all together? And we're very grateful you brought us all together, but why have you chosen this show to talk about something that you're so passionate about?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. First of all, we have got an amazing panel here, so it's a real honour to be sharing the microphone with these wonderful guys next to me. I think suicide prevention is something that I've sort of found myself getting more and more involved in and wanting to talk about, but trying to find the language to talk about it has been quite tricky. I've been involved in trying to make mental health awareness a thing for the last few years, and I think the journey on that has brought us to a place to talk about suicide prevention. And what I'm not sure people will know is the amount of young people, particularly men, who are affected by suicide. It's the biggest killer of young men in the UK a year. So 6,500 men under the age of 45 go through some sort of attempt to suicide. And I think it's a real national catastrophe, really, that we don't talk about it enough. Now, I've been going through my own journey, understanding how to talk about it publicly, because I want to make sure I'm sensitive to this issue, and I'm very glad there's people better qualified to talk about this than me here today. But from my own experiences and my own understanding of it with those in the community of mental health and services to help, I felt something like this today is a really good way to reach out to young guys, particularly, who unfortunately are more affected by suicide than women. That's not to say women aren't, but I think the guys will say, but I think 3/4 of people affected by suicide are men. And I think we're not very good at talking about it, and we're best to talk about it and share our collective experiences and thoughts and care for this community than on Radio 1.
It's a very powerful statement to have prominent men like yourselves talking about it openly on a big platform like Radio 1. And I'd love to pick up on something that William was saying about other people being better qualified. And actually, yes, of course, there are people that are immensely qualified in this, but really what we need to do in breaking the stigma is to find a language for all of us to talk about it. And how would we start about going about that? And is there a worry about getting it wrong that makes people go, oh, I won't say anything then?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And a really important question, what is it we say when we notice that somebody's life might be consumed by their own anxieties, difficulties, life stresses? And I guess what we would always suggest is just be your usual genuine self. Notice the changes, the experiences that people have and are having. And by shying away, what we're doing is we're preventing an opportunity for that moment, that really important moment, that interaction to be something that could potentially go on to save a man's life. So I think there is a stigma and a belief and a worry that what if we say the wrong thing? By asking somebody about their suicidal experiences, their feelings, their plans, that might plant a seed and make them carry out those plans, when actually that's an absolute myth. By asking somebody about their stresses, their vulnerabilities, if they're at risk, if they are thinking of doing something dangerous, if they are thinking that suicide might be an option for them, what that does is, rather than plant a seed, it encourages, conversation. It encourages an opportunity for people to say, actually, let me share exactly what's going on for me, and that could be the first step towards help. And I think everybody across the community, across the land, can be that person who enables somebody to make that first conversation and recognise the difficulties that they have and seek the support that is absolutely available. And for me, one of the key messages is, don't worry about asking, don't worry about saying the wrong thing, but know that there is hope, and sharing that hope is something that's really powerful for men to hear.
Nathan, I'd love to talk to you about your journey. It'll be really great to share whatever you're comfortable sharing, really, about how you found yourself, what position you were in, and also what was the moment you thought, okay, I'm going to ask for help, I'm going to do this. How did it? Tell us the story, please, if you wouldn't mind.
Thanks, Greg. In terms of my own mental health, I've struggled with my mental health for quite a while now. I would say from about as early as 14, 15. From quite a young age, I became my mum's full-time carer. That was from the age of 11. So I've had a lot of responsibilities at home. I was also brought up in a single parent household, so it's always just been me, my mum and her sisters. So in terms of how I would deal with my own feelings, as a male, I never really had that support in my household. As time developed and I started noticing these difficulties and encountering certain situations where I couldn't quite deal with my emotions, I've went through several different places, cognitive behavioural therapy, speaking to doctors, and it was after a quite significant period last year where a lot of different factors came into place that really affected my mental health. And it got to a point where I started planning on taking my own life just through the way things were falling. And it was during that time that I eventually reached out and found James's place in November of last year. So I spent a lot of time with James's place figuring out what was wrong, sort of getting us on the right track and helping me understand my emotions more and figuring out how to best deal with situations and move on in life.
Thanks for sharing that, by the way. And also, I'm really pleased that you're here. I think it's a really powerful bit of this, which is, yes, it's obviously right that we talk about the tragedies, but we should also talk about the successes. And you are, the embodiment of what we're talking about here, really, which is reach out. You're stronger when you're with other people, and you're on a different path now. And how do you feel now?
I was having this conversation earlier on, before we came here, and I'm very much under the impression, had I not have sought that help and found James's place, that I wouldn't be sat here having this conversation with you. It let us see the other side of life, how I'm not sort of controlled or dictated by how I feel or what my emotions are. And it's just been a really, really good stepping stone for me to go into that next chapter of my life.
Stephen, Professor Green, I saw you nodding when Nathan was talking then about understanding your brain. How have you managed to step towards that? Because it's difficult. The brain is often not your friend.
Yeah.
It sometimes works against you.
Given the opportunity, it often does, which is weird. Like, why is my brain my op?
Yeah.
It lives between my two ears, and it's my own opposition sometimes.
Yeah.
Nathan, I think you spoke really eloquently about emotions and being able to sit with them and tend to them. And I think all too often we are quite, as men especially, detached from how we feel. You ask a man how he feels and he'll tell you what he thinks. And we do, I know we all too often find our way to very unhealthy ways of altering or escaping from how we feel. And as a 42-year-old man, I am stepping towards understanding the workings of my brain by way of trying to sit with my feelings. And it feels like there's a bit of a disconnect sometimes between what I think and what I feel, but one can spur the other, and then it becomes chicken and egg, and that's really hard to tend to sometimes. I've got a little boy who is nearly 5, Slemaine, and through encouraging him to be able to name his emotions, I've had to kind of expedite my learning so I can stay just ahead of him. But it's been the most important part of learning for me, because it's enabled me to really start to engage with what I feel at any given time. And I think something else that's important to remember for men especially is to not, and for women actually encountering men who might be struggling with what they feel, is not to try and fix that immediately. It happens all too often. Someone tells you they're upset, cheer up. You want to change how they feel rather than sitting with that. And I think that's telling of a lot of people, again, not being able to sit with how they feel and therefore not with how someone else feels.
Yeah, experience of people in my life that have severe mental health issues. It's when you're on the other side of it and you're trying to help them, it's often, the conversation is often, what do you need from me? How do you want me to try and help? And my wife says this to me sometimes. She says, sometimes I just want you to get in the trenches with me. And other times it'll be, I need a reminder to go outside. I need a reminder to call my mum. So it's not easy, this stuff, Alan, it's not saying it's easy. Isaac, do you think there's progress in the way we talk about mental illness?
I think so. When I look at my dad, who was a very quiet man, a reserved man, a caring man, and a good dad. I don't remember a single conversation I had with him about his emotions or how he felt. He mostly spoke to me when he was getting me to do something or telling me off. I never doubted that he loved me, and he's passed now. But when I think about him, I don't necessarily think he didn't want to have those conversations. Just don't think he was equipped with the tools to do so. And so kind of taking his example and looking at the things that he did well and the things that he didn't do so well, kind of took it upon myself to try and learn so that I could be a dad that was emotionally literate. And taking that responsibility and that ownership has blessed my son. And when I look at the kind of family tree from my dad, who didn't really talk, to me, who's learning how to talk with the tools that I'm developing, to my son, who's 6 years old and already way more emotionally literate than myself and my father, I think things are changing, but I think there's a lot more examples, there's a lot more information, and unfortunately there's a lot more tragedies that we're open to. And I think a lot more men are looking at that and thinking, I don't want my life to go in that direction, so I'm going to stand up today and try and do something.
William, do you notice that your children talk openly about their feelings, their day, how they were feeling about a certain thing?
Yeah, sometimes too much. To get all the details, which I love. You know, it's amazing, and being able to understand it, have time with it, decipher it sometimes, because like the guys are saying, you know, it's you feel a sense you need to fix it for everyone, and that I find quite difficult. I have to remind myself, you know, you don't need to fix everything, but you do need to listen, and it's important just to be okay with those feelings and those comments. But you know, like everyone's saying, the next generation understanding that emotions is okay, and like you're going to have uncomfortable emotions, you're going to have really great emotions, and there's a huge spectrum of in between. And I think my understanding, you know, learning about mental health through my journey has been about seeing how the previous generations trying to understand why they didn't talk about it. So for me to understand where we are now, I need to understand where we've been. And for me, I think the situation with the world wars, generations before us couldn't talk about their emotions. They saw and they went through some really horrendous things that no matter how much you try and talk about it, it wouldn't have really helped anyone. And so they as a generation decided, probably not deliberately, but they just kept it to themselves. And they then hand that mantle on to the next generation. Again, not deliberately, but by sort of, that's all they knew. And we have to break that cycle where it's, you know, you have to talk about your emotions. You can't just bottle them up and pretend they don't exist, because that's when it all goes wrong. And you end up drinking lots, unraveling, you know, being in torment. And so it's important, I think, that we understand where we are now. We've got a long way to go in this journey of mental health, but it's really crucial we know where we've come from, because that is such important growth for all of us to get our heads around where we're trying to head to.
I talked to my mum about therapy. I said to her, you should do this. She lost her mum not so long ago. And my dad's he's had depression pretty much his whole life, but didn't really know what it was, because that was the 80s and 90s. And I said to my mum, do you ever think that you should do some therapy? And she said, I don't know. I wouldn't like to think what they'd find. that's essentially the issue right there. I went, okay, you realise that you're a sort of a sitcom character now by saying that sort of thing. Alan, I'd like to get back to you and talk about that. Do you feel, from your professional perspective, that things have moved on and that the conversation has shifted from it's good to talk about stuff to, okay, what can we do about it to prevent it in the future, and what are some sustainable things to do?
So I think the first thing is the fact that we're having this conversation. We've heard from 3 dads who've got young children, and the way that they are emotionally attuning to what their children are saying and feeling and thinking. And as William says, without the need to think, oh, crikey, what's going on here now? What does I need to do to attend to or sort out their particular issues or challenges? You know, the sad facts are that we know, as William mentioned, that for men under the age of 35, suicide is the leading cause of death. And between the ages of 45 and 55, it's the biggest risk factor for men ending their life by suicide. So we've got a generational example here of young children being now supported to think, act, feel and learn about their emotions, through to people in my generation, the mid-50s. That's not something we've done. But one of the things I'd really like to sort of expresses that process of therapy. So in James's place, and Nathan might share some of his experiences, is we offer 6 to 8 sessions. So we offer one session, which is a welcome, tell us about your experiences. We work out together what's going on, and the myth that men don't speak. We've had 4,500 men who have arrived at the centre, often speaking to us as the first person they've ever shared their experiences. And through a process over a course of 6 to 8 appointments, have moved from feeling stuck, feeling that they don't belong, feeling stressed, confused, overwhelmed by challenges and difficulties, to the point where they think suicide might be an option for them, to a point when they can reappraise and rethink, actually, no wonder these challenges, these difficulties have got me to a point when my problem solving has reduced, or I've turned to other means to try and help manage my particular difficulties that haven't worked. So between 6 to 8 sessions, we can move somebody from suicidal crisis out of suicidal crisis and moving forward. So I want to just really emphasise that point, because whichever generation you're in, the first step is seeking help. And once you're in that right place at the right time with somebody in that moment who's really listening and caring, wonderful things can happen. And again, I don't know whether Nathan wants to come in terms of that, from welcome assessment to or the help that can happen within a short amount of time, because that might dispel some myths that people have about therapy, as you've mentioned.
Absolutely. Yeah, Nathan, I'd love to hear more about your process and your journey to where you are now.
So my experience was obviously a really good experience. Like I said previously, I've dealt with sort of mental health issues for a while now, and I've always managed them as best as I can and in my own way. As well, in my professional career in sort of retail management, I have also done a lot in supporting employees around having these types of conversations. So I've always been able to provide and support other people, but when it comes to myself, that's where I was lacking in that sort of area. The best way that I described it when I was speaking to my therapist was I kind of felt like I had all the pieces of the puzzle already in my head, and how to figure out on the next steps to go. But because of all the stress that was there, and like Allan just said, your sort of problem solving skills kind of get put to the back of your mind. One of the biggest things for me was the cards that I used. It kind of gives you sort of a structure on how you're feeling, and sometimes I really struggled putting it into words. I knew I was feeling some sort of way, but being able to convey that was the hardest part, of putting it in the right context. And I found speaking to someone who is trained to do these sorts of things really, really helped the process and helped me start to put these pieces of the jigsaw back together to let us move on and kind of continue with my life.
And things that you've learned there, are you still implementing? Do those ideas and those thoughts and and everything that you learned there, do they still pop up in your head and go, right, I must do that. I'm feeling this way. I now need to go and do that to make myself feel better. Yeah, all the time. It's now I see it as more of like a set of tools, and I know how I can fix, or I know how I can implement certain things if I'm feeling a certain way and keep myself going forward. I don't feel as though I'm hitting that point where I'm moving backwards, which I felt like I was doing a lot of last year prior to being with James's place. It gives me more of the direction to remain well. It's the best way that I could put it. And also to go easy on yourself if you don't quite get it right, and realise that it's not always going to be, I'm fine now. There will be moments where you'll go, oof, that's taken me by surprise, and realising that that's completely normal as well.
Yeah, one of the biggest pressures that I felt, obviously, being a full-time carer as well from such a young age, is the responsibility that's been on me sort of running the household, and as well with my career. I mean, I manage retail stores, so there's a lot of people who rely on me, so I never really put myself at the forefront of that. So having these tools, as I say, is a really, really good thing to have.
Isaac, I saw you nodding when Nathan was talking about supporting other people while you're also struggling with something. How have you found that, and how have you developed those skills over your life?
I'm still learning, still on that journey. I've not done very well. I actually surprise myself with how well I can function at a high level while struggling and feeling really numb inside. I can still go about my daily activities, do my work well, be a parent. But the issue is when I'm not healthy on the inside or in my mind, I'm doing it without being fully present. And the thing that I've learned the most that has helped me is trying to be honest with people that love me unconditionally. I've been blessed in the sense that I've never really felt physically lonely in my life. I've always been around family and friends that care for me, but I've always struggled to completely be honest with my emotions, which in a way is a kind of loneliness that I really struggle with. And I remind myself that at my healthiest, when I'm being open and honest, my feelings start to come back and I start to work them out. Really silly example, but coffee is like my best kind of notifier. When I'm numb and struggling mentally, I'll have coffee every day, but I can't taste it.
Oh wow.
But when I'm healthy and I'm saying how I feel and I'm being open and honest with the people around me, even if they rely on me, I start to taste my coffee again.
These are good markers, though. But this is about knowing yourself, Alan, isn't it? This is what we're saying. This is not being surprised that you're having a feeling and going, that's a marker. Unless that was your way of saying, would you like me to get you a coffee? I should have offered you a drink. I'm sorry. That was. But Alan, those are important. That is about knowing yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we are consumed with our own stresses or vulnerabilities, or again, if we're feeling that we're not belonging or we haven't got a place, if we're overwhelmed by how we're feeling and not able to share that, then sometimes that occupies, all of your senses, all of your feelings. Your body knows and is responding to that stress. So the simple things in life, the simple pleasures might go unnoticed. It sort of resonates as Isaac was talking. I know particularly when I'm overwhelmed with stress or if I've got lots on my mind, what my body does, my tummy turns, and I don't always know why my tummy's turning, because the thing that is immediately on my mind feels a little bit distant. So, part of the things that we do with anybody who's in, a suicidal crisis or whose mental health warrants some conversation is helping them just notice, know yourself, know your body, what things are changing for you, what's different today than it was yesterday. And those markers become really important signs that might be, just hold on a moment, I'm noticing something is different. What's that difference about? Now I'm noticing difference. Would I benefit from doing something that's helpful for me, grounding myself, mindfulness, going for a walk, tasting coffee, seeing a friend, reaching out to whoever or however? So there's something quite important around noticing ourselves in our context, day by day, minute by minute, particularly when we're overwhelmed or consumed by our own stresses and vulnerability. So we can find the sign to say, let's pause, let's do something, let's invite somebody else in if we're able to do so.
William, what are those markers for you when you feel stressed or overwhelmed, and what do you do to release the valve, I guess?
Well, I'm the opposite to Isaac. If I drink coffee, I go completely bananas. So there's too much caffeine. The caffeine gets me really kind of agitated, actually. If I overdo the caffeine, I definitely feel it during the day. But for me, I find when I break out of a situation. So let's say I had a really busy week with work, family life's busy, lots going on there. When I step away for 24 hours, that's when I kind of take stock of where I'm at. Because it's really weird. If you listen to the body and have time to process your thoughts and your feelings, it will present itself to you, and you feel like actually that week's been quite brutal for whatever reason, or actually it's been a really good week and I've come away and I'm really energized and I've got so much creativity bubbling away in my head or whatever it might be. So it's really important you have those moments where you take stock, and the biggest example for me was when I was doing work with the air ambulance, and I was a pilot flying with them, and we had busy jobs, and you had people in sadly very difficult situations that you were having to sort of help them with and work with. And over time, I noticed my mental health really deteriorating, and I hadn't really clocked onto it, because in that community, you try and make light of some of the moments just to keep, frankly, sane and keep going. And so it wasn't until I stepped away from it on a sort of longer break that I looked at myself and went, my God, I'm carrying everyone's emotional baggage. And so what I was doing was I was taking snippets from each job I'd been on, each family member that had been distraught or whatever, and I was carrying that in myself, and it was really weighing me down. And that's what I've done a lot of work with the blue light community, because I think that happens to a lot of them, is it's not until you step away from it, either that you retire or you have a break, which many of them don't get long enough breaks, are you able to kind of process what kind of attritional, mental, emotional experiences you're having each time. And you can't have time to deal with that. It's coming at you so fast. And if you're carrying a bit of emotional baggage, you like, from each scene, from someone else's experience, it just weighs you down. So for me, coming away from the situation is really important for us to be able to take stock of just what we've been through and what our brain is processing.
Stephen, I'd love to talk to you about trauma that you've been through and a moment that you thought, okay, this is how I can do it. This is how I can survive the spiral. This is how I can. Did you have a breakthrough? When did you start putting together the toolbox that you now dip into?
I'll be honest, until my father took his own life, mental health wasn't even a phrase that I'd come across really, or that I'd noticed or really paid any attention to.
And how old were you?
I was 24.
Right.
Yeah, he was 43, so just a year older than I am now. And I understand there's a spike around that age, which kind of makes sense to me. I think the cumulative effect of a life of mismanaged feelings, inability to process, to sit with, I think that has real effect. But for me, I mean, breakthroughs are ongoing. I think I notice things getting difficult for me when everything gets a bit quick and things start to, simple things, text messages, phone calls that go unanswered start to enter my world as threat. And I'm like, there is so much perceived threat that I am stuck in survival mode. And when that happens, your brain's hijacked. You just become amygdala driven. It's very primitive, and you don't have access to, and by the way, I'm ADHD and autistic, so I don't have great access to executive function, prefrontal cortex anyway. But, you throw stress in the mix, and life stresses, and cumulative life stress, and you're disabled. You don't have the ability to make rational decision. And then with rumination, which can be a problem for me, and I think for a lot of people, which people might presume is just normal, it's just how they are, but it's not a normal way to function, to continually have cyclical and negative thought spirals is not normal and not healthy and not good. It becomes overwhelming, and that's where danger is. So I think my breakthrough is noting all of that, and noting that things are getting a bit quick, and having tools, healthy tools, to find my way back.
And how have you managed to find peace with the fact that your brain will let you down, no matter how much work, in inverted commas, you put into it?
Yeah, it's acceptance. I think it was Carl Jung who said something along the lines of, you can either suffer or have mental health issues. So willingness to suffer and sit in discomfort, again, going back to being able to just sit with your feelings, is really important. And I think, sadly, when people reach a point of such desperation that they make attempt or do in fact take their own life, it's because their feelings have become intolerable.
And for anyone listening now, Allan, who is nodding along to hearing what Stephen's saying, what now? What's the initial, even small step? What's the next thing to do? If we're doing this show to be helpful, which we are, that's why we're here, what is the next thing to do?
I think the important message is there is hope, there's change is coming, support is available. So I think the first thing is for people to hold in mind that despite however they're feeling, whichever mood state or experiences they're currently having, there is hope and there is opportunity to change, either through a friend, family member, loved one, carer, or accessing some professional support or professional services. So the men that we see typically range from 18 up to people into their 80s, and one of the things that we've learned from them is the first step that they took was name what was going on for them, and noticing, as Stephen was describing, I've now reached the point where it feels like there's no return, and the only remaining option is to put this plan, this worrisome plan, into place, and for that to be the trigger to seeking help. But ideally what we would want is for people not to get to that place where this option of death by suicide is something that they're planning for, but far sooner to be able to speak up and reach out for help. But I think the key message is there is hope, and there are people who care deeply. There are your friends and family and loved ones and organisations who are there to help you move from where you are one step forward, which is about naming the experiences that you've got and knowing quite quickly you can be helped.
Like Nathan, relatively quickly,
yeah.
And being surrounded by people who are just saying, you're important.
Yeah.
You've got loads of things you can add to the world. Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Allan. Stephen, before we get back to your story in particular, I just wanted to ask William about Shout. So Shout is an amazing service as well, which you're involved with.
Yeah, so after our mental health sort of campaign, which is called Heads Together, back in the day now, it takes it back a bit.
we met.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that where you first met?
Yeah,
Heads Together.
Yeah, we did.
But look, this is nice. Together,
yeah, exactly.
Still. Yeah, friends for life.
I've not been quite so successful musically, but
there's still time. There's still time.
And we decided that we needed to put in a service there, because we felt responsible that we'd open a conversation nationally up about mental health, and it went well in terms of people responded to it. We felt we probably had to put a service in there because where were the people going to go when they did start talking about it? And so we came up with the first crisis text line called Shout, which has now done over 3 million conversations, which is, if anyone doesn't know, it's a lot of it is volunteer-based, people on laptops replying to text messages to anyone and everyone who texts in, with plenty of people like Allan in the background providing the support and the sort of clinical reassurance as to what's going on. And out of those 3 million conversations that have happened, roughly 1 million of those people have had medical intervention through either clinicians or emergency services having to be called, which is quite a staggering number, really. A third of them have needed some sort of medical intervention. So the need is out there. The need is there for people to be supported. I think there's a lot of isolation out there. Texting can help. Sometimes looking each other in the eye is quite difficult to talk about some serious stuff that's bothering you. You've never spoken to anyone else about it. Being able to write it on a phone and send it to somebody you know is a human, not a robot, is quite reassuring. And I think also it's not a clinical environment. Allan will say, I think for guys sometimes making it too clinical makes it too nitty-gritty and difficult to talk about, whereas if you're texting, you're kind of chatting as you go, it feels a little bit more distant and kind of easier to be able to deal with some of those feelings.
Yeah, I guess it makes it feel less official. And then because there is still the shame, like, I've gone to the doctor because something's wrong with me, and that I understand that there's a worry about that. Well, Stephen, I just wanted to go back to your documentary actually, and how that has played out for you. Because incredibly useful and helpful for people to watch that, but very difficult for you to do, and for you to then receive the feedback and then everyone telling you their story. That's a lot to deal with, but you surely have seen it as a net gain, a net positive in the world. It's a remarkable bit of work.
Thank you.
And if you're not comfortable talking about it right now, that's completely fine.
Just 1 second.
On it, it's all completely fine. This is exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, it does. It stirs up so many emotions. That's the thing, doesn't it? You relive stuff.
And it's incredibly tricky to navigate these conversations.
But if I can say something as well, Greg, I mean, both Isaac and Stephen talk so eloquently about men's mental health. There's so few people out there who do it.
Yeah.
And I think that is really important to acknowledge, because part of feeling comfortable talking about mental health is understanding it. And if you've got guys who have really gone about trying to really learn about what feelings are, why we feel like we do, what can we do about it, that's part of the conversation too. We need more male role models out there kind of talking about it and normalizing it, so that it becomes something that is second nature to all of us. And everyone's talked about their toolkit, and I'm the same. Having a toolbox we can't, when we're born and when we grow up and, through life, you're sort of, depending by circumstance, family, upbringing, whatever it might be, you have a certain toolbox next to you, but no one has all the tools in it. Not one person in this world has all the tools for every eventuality your mental state's going to come across. And I like to go around looking for new tools to put in my toolbox when I might need it. And if we look at it like that, it does normalize the idea that the brain just needs sometimes a little bit of help, but we can't expect to have all the answers ourselves. And it's okay to ask for support, ask a mate, reach out, and that becomes just the normalization process of what's going on inside your head.
Yeah.
And vulnerability breeds vulnerability. So I grew up listening to Stephen's music as, this super cool, masculine rapper that I wanted to be like. And then I hear him talking about...
So far away from the amazing people's idea of who you are.
In all seriousness, then I hear him talking about his struggles and his journey and his mental health. That then gives me the permission to look at that part of my life and gives me the confidence to be able to work that stuff out. So completely agree with what William said there.
The permission thing, what a great word to use.
It's the most poignant word.
Great, yeah.
You're walking around looking for permission. Someone's heartbroken, they're amongst a circle of friends, and they're just waiting for someone else to go, oh my God, I've had my heart broken, so they can step forward and share. And it's such an important, honestly, I think that's the most poignant word throughout, maybe potentially even this whole conversation, not that we've had it all yet. Permission's so important. And I think one of the most important things that came from that documentary, or even there was a radio documentary that I did for Radio 1 with Dr. Aaron Baddock, who's now my therapist. He was a part of the documentary and a suicide survivor. So it started here and then made its way to television. And it was incredibly hard because my dad's gone. I can't have him back. But I've had messages from people who said it saved their life. And it's bittersweet because the response to that continues to this day is because of how many people are affected and impacted. And I was probably the least likely candidate, to your point, to open up the floor to the conversation around men's mental health. But that kind of happened. I walked into it naively because of Read All About It, the song about my father's death, which was my first and only #1 single. So every interview on breakfast radio, on whatever radio it was about my dad's suicide. And there was something so powerful in that as far as lesson, because I began to understand through the process and in therapy and being able to draw parallel that being able to talk about things and not disengage from the emotion or disconnect from the emotion in a way that's disingenuous, but in a way that allows you to talk about things, for the most part, not today, without the emotion that's attached to those situations or what's happened, is powerful. So actually something being more prominent gives it less emotional power and hold over you. So it's so important to talk about the things that are difficult.
Well, it's also incredibly emotionally powerful to be listening to a radio show where you are able to cry about it and you are unable to talk about it, because that's completely fine and completely normal. And actually, just going back to when Isaac was saying how much he loved listening to your music when he was growing up, you immediately went modest and you went, I'm not that guy. You're like, I'm not that guy.
When I come off stage and someone says that was amazing, and I feel it's my job to tell them why it wasn't. It's like they're paying for a ticket. I'm telling them the show was rubbish. It's a defense mechanism. Sorry, I'm not. Listen, I'm a work in progress, but I'm doing the work.
No, I know. But what I'm saying is, you're sort of not a work in progress because you're all of it. That was what was coming into my brain when you were saying, oh, don't say that. But you're all of those things, and that makes you infinitely more interesting. That you're able to go up and headline a festival, you're able to go into a studio and write an amazing record, and also be able to
be a complete emotional wreck,
but be flawed by it. Absolutely, man. And that's what we're talking about with the permission thing.
That's the human experience, isn't it? And I think for as long as we try and hide from those parts of ourselves, the worst parts of ourselves, or what we deem to be the bad parts of ourselves, everyone wants to be the best version of themselves. People don't. You never really hear someone say, "I'm striving to be the most honest version of myself," and that honesty comes from authenticity, and that comes from understanding. That's how you can't give meaning to anything, not even life, without understanding. And it's our life, myself. It's in the word.
Absolutely. One of the things, noticing, Greg, as we're talking, that's coming to mind is we're sitting, we're sharing experiences, reflecting about how it feels to be us, and getting, seeking permission to share. And I think that's one of the key challenges in anybody seeking help, in that it's often up to the man, and we know historically due to, myths and assumptions, due to the earlier conversation around whether we keep things in, that we're not particularly good at reaching out and letting people know exactly how we feel. And I guess the examples we've just had is another example of we hold it in and we're trying to find somebody for whom we can, take that first step with. And wouldn't it be even better if everybody was naturally always assuming somebody's waiting for me to offer myself to them, so that first step can be taken. I've had conversations with my own friends recently who've had their own challenges and difficulties, and I just didn't know. And I work in therapy. I've worked in therapy for 30 years. I've had my own ups and downs in life, as many of us have had. So would class myself as somebody who's really attuned to people, but I probably have bracketed those folks off as they're the people who are giving my energy. They're the people who help me out, just being my my genuine self. But they're not necessarily the people I would say, oh, actually, as you were saying, I'm not doing okay. I'm actually having a really tough time, but I can't put it into words. So it's not up for the man always to find the words to say what's going on, but sometimes I think in the societies that we live in, that's what we're waiting to find the right words to signal to somebody else, now we can have a conversation, now we can help you get the help you need, rather than just adjusting that conversation and thinking if we're all in society ready to signal to others we're ready to listen, regardless of whether you've got things, that will be a powerful shift.
Being on receive, being on receive mode is good. Receive and listen. And look, the permission is granted, right? If you've got the future king, say, is permission granted?
Well, I was about to say, there's not many shows you can get where you've got a professor, a governor, a prince. So surely that's saying something. Like, that's the inner workings of any nation.
But this will be helping now. Like, there will be people listening to this going, oh, okay, well, if it's okay for Prince William and for Professor Green and for Nathan to come on air and be in a position where you're so able to just speak openly about what you've been through, then it's okay. This is permission. Nathan, I would love to talk to you about your friends' reaction, the closest people in your life to you. How have you noticed them evolve around you and take this on board?
Yeah, so I don't really have a lot of people around me. I tend to keep my circle quite small. But again, in those situations, I've always seen myself kind of the person at the top. I've always been the friend that people go to advice for. So again, when it came to my own feelings, it wasn't something, again, going back to the permission side, it felt as though I was always waiting for permission to speak about how I'm feeling. And all it really took was having that conversation with a really, really close friend of mine. I mean, I would class him more as a brother than a friend, just the relationship that we've had with each other through the years. I was initially quite hesitant to open up. The way I always looked at it was everyone's got their own lives, everyone's got their own things going on, and I seen myself as a bit of a burden at first. I mean, my friend he'd just had a baby, he'd just moved in with his partner. His life was going in a completely different direction to what mine felt at the time. And it wasn't until after speaking to James's place and being open with my friend about what I was going through that I realised I'd kind of put that burden on myself. I'd seen it as though if I was going to open up and speak to those around me, maybe they would see us in a different light, or the respect that there might have been for me wouldn't be there. So again, and that's just going back to your brain can sometimes be your own worst enemy. I was thinking all these things, and once I sat and had this conversation and laid it out, I realised I wasn't alone, and it opened, again, it kind of gave my friend permission to open up about some of the struggles he's feeling as being a new dad and progressing in his career. And it was a really, really healthy conversation, and coming off the back of that, it's built our relationship even stronger. We know that, oh, okay, well, we're not too dissimilar with the things that we're feeling, and whilst our lives might be going in different directions in terms of careers and things like that, there's always something that we can connect over, and it's always good to have someone there who knows what you're going through and has seen what you've been through in the past, and you can kind of use as a sounding board. And again, just someone who's willing to listen and not necessarily throw the quick fixes. And like Stephen said before, of cheer up, like that doesn't work all the time. You need that time to be able to sit with your emotions and talk them through.
Isaac, how have you managed to identify people in your life that you can have those conversations with? And did you find it initially difficult to do that?
Yeah, very difficult. I think, I grew up in a community, kind of working class, council estate area where, stiff upper lip was what we lived by. If you go through anything kind of deep or traumatic, pick yourself up and get on with it. Culturally, my parents are African, and it's similar kind of way that we operate, and just being conditioned for years and years and years, it takes its toll. But when my dad passed away, dad after a short battle with cancer, I tried to do that, and I got through it for about 3 months. And then I was on tour in America, went for a walk on a beach, and I just broke down, completely broke down. I don't just think I was crying about my dad, I think I was kind of mourning all the traumatic things that have happened in my life that I haven't processed. And my first step after that was telling my brother. And it was just because in recovery we call it the gift of desperation. And it was because I had to. And that kind of opened up this new tool in my toolbox of being able to, even if I can't completely articulate what I'm feeling, to talk to people that love me unconditionally. So it's just identifying who those are, and people that have stood the test of time through various trials, but also communities that I haven't always been exposed to. Like, every Monday night I go to this recovery group full of people that I didn't know when I first walked in. Now I've become good friends, and we just share about our lives, and it's the most amazing thing ever. So sometimes it's people close to you, sometimes it's someone random that you've never ever met before. But just looking out for those signposts.
There's some common themes here. I'm really interested to hear what you said, Nathan, about feeling like you were at the top. So that you were in charge of everyone else's emotions. And I think that's a lot of people, men, women, whoever, that's sort of what you feel like a lot of the time. And that's a big thing to push through, which is you can be in charge of lots of things and have a busy job, be the Prince of Wales, for example, and you might feel like you can't do anything. That's quite paralysing, isn't it, Alan? That whole thing of, okay, I'm supposed to be holding this all together. Am I allowed to crumble? And you are allowed to crumble. That's the message, right? You are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess what we've learned from many of the men that we see is they come to us at a time when relationships are broken down, there's financial issues, there's loss, there's other difficulties. And one of the things they say, they've got all that going on, and now I might not have the same access to my children. I'm not going to be able to provide for my children the same way. I can't care for my partner in the way that I have done previously. So I think there is something really important about recognising that we're constantly a step or two away from having major life events, major life difficulties, but we never really have a chance to prepare ourselves for them happening. And when they do, they can feel really, all consuming. And that's certainly, I think, what part of the conversation's helping me reflect on, that we're all carrying stuff with us all the time. We're also carrying other people's stuff too. And that's part of human nature. But it's also one of the challenges that men say to us is, I don't want to burden people because I know what it feels like to be burdened. And we try and encourage people to say, you're not burdening, you're taking one step towards help and recovery and seeking advice. So it's a really complicated picture.
Yeah, it is complicated.
We absorb everybody else's stuff, and we use that as a reason why we don't then want to share others, but we're very happy to receive information from other people. And I think the key message is, wherever you are on the stage of difficulties that you have, it's not about burdening people, it's about starting a conversation which could lead you down a path which is really helpful and supportive and encouraging and happy, and that's certainly what I would encourage.
Particularly difficult if your disposition is everything's under control. Very difficult. That tends to be the natural state of busy dad, busy someone at work. That's hard to get your head around, isn't it? When on the surface everything seems to be going well, to find that network, you have to push through something, don't you, with that?
Yeah. We're all juggling so many things in life, and you don't want to drop a ball. And so you've then also got to work out, well, if I am going to admit that I'm struggling, how on earth am I going to find the time in all this to go and talk to someone like Allan? That's the bit I hear quite a bit as well, is like people just don't know when and how to break out of it. And that's why there's got to be some mechanism somewhere where, you know, I've been advocating quite a while for, in the blue light community particularly, about them having enforced breaks, because the nature of how they work in hospitals and in the police force and things like that is they don't want to burden each other with their problems and their worries, so they just push through, because if they go off sick, someone else has got to cover more stuff. So the nature of that means they just keep going and going until eventually they just break and fall over, and you go piece them back together, and it's a worse situation to do. So early intervention and early diagnosis, early signs is really, really important. But until we conquer this generational problem where to ask for support, you have to put your hand up effectively and say, I need support. No one, instinctively human, likes to be that person who puts their hand up and says, well, I need support. So we have to change that entire process so that it's not down to the individual, and actually you're given the space in life through work, whatever it might be, to be able to explore that and understand that maybe I do need a bit of a change of scene, a bit of a break. Because I think it's very hard to put your hand up and say, I'm that person, I need that support.
Do we all have someone, by the way? I'm just interested. I mean, I speak to a therapist. Nathan, you regularly, do you check in with people? Are you still in touch with James's place?
I still check in with people regularly now who, coming out the back of James's place, I've been more open with, and who are aware of what's going on. Again, going back to my best friend, my mum and my auntie are more aware of what's going on. So coming off the back of the treatment that I had with James's place, I've been able to build myself sort of a support network who might not necessarily be there for support, but they're aware of what's going on. They're there if I need just a chat or 5 minutes away from whatever's going on in life. So I've found it very, very good to have that sort of support centre, really.
Yeah. And Isaac?
I think so. My therapist recently put up his prices, so I've gone from every week to once a month. But we got on quite well, and my recovery group's great. I'm learning to be. I love what Stephen said about, you know, we strive to be the best versions of ourselves. But we rarely strive to be honest. And I think I'm just trying to take responsibility of that. I know that there's people in my life that love me unconditionally, just turning up as honest as possible. But yeah, I've got a community which I'm grateful for.
And everyone's got that gang. William, what's your gang? What's your go-to thing when you need to just decompress and just say what you really think about your day? You might have found some of the events you've done boring. Who do you tell?
Certainly not Radio 1.
I don't want you to tell me about that. But I think people listening will go, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of a Prince having a bad day. It's very powerful to say things like that. I really do. I believe that.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, listen, I'm not immune to bad days at all. I get plenty of them. But for me, the problem, I think, is that I'm quite emotionally available, and I like that about who I am. And I find some of the places I go to, people I meet are having a really tricky time. That helps me put my own life into perspective, but also I carry with me their burden sometimes, and that's the bit I find very difficult. Is I feel other people's pain, and that overwhelms me sometimes, and I have to deal with that because, you know, I just care when I meet people who are in trouble or having a bad day, and you want to help, you want to fix it. We talked about at the beginning, and you can't necessarily fix some of the stuff, and emotionally I find that very challenging.
It's been a really fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I've loved getting to know you all. Some of you I know anyway, and it's been nice to get a bit deeper with those sorts of things. It's been great to meet you, Nathan. Thank you so much for your time today. Allan, thank you for yours. Isaac, it's been a treat meeting you as well. I would actually love to do this again if you were up for it. I do think this is a nice support group. This feels great, and I hope everyone listening has taken something from this or found it interesting, or maybe can take something from this and go, I noticed my friend has been a little quieter than usual. Or if you are yourself struggling with your own brain, then I hope that some of this has been useful, and that some of the stigma that maybe you held has been etched away slightly. I would love to just go down the line and just ask you for a final thought or a final message for anyone who's sitting there going, okay, I need to do something, I don't know what it is. What's the next step? Allan, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, so just to, I guess, repeat what I said before, remember there is hope and there are many places that you can go. Some of those will be health services, have conversations with your GP, attend an A&E department, call 111, line 2, phone 999, get to somebody to let them know how you're doing. There are, a number of organisations, Shout, Papyrus, the Samaritans. So, find your tribe, find your group of people who will be there to help and support you. And for those who can access, James's Place, then we'd really welcome, conversations and getting to know. Can I also just say that I think one of the things that is really important is as William was saying before, that one of the things to really notice is that when people need help, we've learned very clearly today that men take a long time to get to that point when they need help. So when they need help, they need it now. So the importance of rapid access. So for example, at James's Place, we see men within 2 days of them letting us know that they want some help and support. Right. The likes of Shout and other organisations do something similar. So for me, again, it's, help can be available super quick. It's not about, I definitely want help, but it's definitely going to take an awful long time. So again, just to address that myth also.
Nathan, anything you want to say to people who might be in a similar situation to you were a few years ago?
I would say that regardless of how you might feel at the time, that you aren't alone. As you've probably heard on here today, there's lots of people out there going through similar things. Everyone's got their own issues going on, and be open, communicate, just be honest with yourself and be honest with those around you about how you're feeling.
And Stephen, where do we go next?
Understanding, awareness, action. I think that's the train that we need to be on. I think we're at a point still of awareness, maybe bridging into understanding.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get to action. And to your point, Allan, about early intervention, men sadly find their way to services when it's too far down the line. In some instances, whether that's physical health issues or mental health issues. It's important that we find language to use to encourage men to access the services which are now becoming available. One tip from me is a very kind of practical one. I've got it written on my hand: go to bed in my mate's handwriting, not with biro, it's a tattoo. But however you feel, go to bed. There's something there's nearly always sleep deprivation when there's a suicide, because it really disables your ability to make rational decision. You become more impulsive, and as a man, you're going to be more impulsive and more violent, hence the methods that men mostly use. Go to bed. Sleep is imperative. It's the most important pillar of well-being.
Isaac?
I think as men, we can be really hard on ourselves, and one thing that's helped me is the ability to hold two things at the same time, so I can take accountability for my own contribution to whatever mess I find myself in. But then on the other side of the coin, I can have empathy for me as a child and the things that I had to face. They're two sides of the same coin. So yeah, I'd say no one's above accountability, but no one is beyond redemption.
And William?
Yeah, I think Isaac hits the nail on the head there as well. I think I was going to say be kind to yourself is really important, and learn to love yourself and understand yourself, really. I take a long time trying to understand my emotions and why I feel like I do. And I think that's a really important process to just do every now and again, to check in with yourself and work out why you're feeling like you do. Sometimes there's an obvious explanation, sometimes there isn't. I think that idea that mental health crisis is temporary. Like, you can have a really strong mental health crisis moment, but it will pass. And with support like James's Place and other organisations, they can be that little stepping stone that just gets you through that moment, and you wake up the next day and you feel completely different. And if we talk about that more and educate people more, then hopefully the idea of suicide keeps being pushed further and further away, because you know that tomorrow actually you might wake up and you might feel very different.
Thank you, all of you, for your time. I've really enjoyed chatting to you all today, and thank you for being so honest. It's been really interesting for me to sit here and absorb it all, and I hope it's really helped people listening. Thank you for listening. If you would like any support for anything we've discussed today, please search the BBC Action Line, and hopefully all of us will be back together at some point soon. That'll be nice. And actually, I think I do need to go to bed. I'm going to take Professor Green's advice, as I often do.
Night, mate.
Good night.
Cheers.